Now, at this time, I would like to introduce our speaker, Miss Elizabeth Pravat. Miss Pravat, we are honored that you are here with us today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jesse, and good morning or afternoon, everybody. We're so thankful that you're here today, and I'm excited to talk about this topic with you. It's very relevant to all of the work that we do. And before we jump into the content itself, I'd like to introduce you to my co-program manager, Miss Tammy Corrado. Ms. Crotto will be monitoring the chat for any questions and periodically joining me on camera to talk about any great topics and conversations that you all are having in the chat. So please feel free to engage in the chat, put any questions there, and we will circle back to those as the topic progresses. And also another individual monitoring the chat will be Ms. Cecily Horner. So she may respond to any questions or react to your comments. We appreciate all involvement today. And again, look forward to engaging with you throughout the session. So today we're going to learn ways that you can be empowered to improve your work relationships. We'll be specifically focusing on your relationship with your supervisor, but really these concepts can be applied to a variety of working relationships. In my over 17 years with VBA, I've served in a variety of roles from claims processor, coach, instructor of a national program, district office management analyst, and chief within a central office business line. And as we talk through some of these textbook concepts, I'll share some of my real world experiences of how I've successfully applied these relationship practices and some scenarios where I could have applied these concepts but missed the opportunity. And ultimately, what I've learned from these experiences. So let's get started. Our objectives today are shown on the screen. And so just to manage your expectations of what you can get out of today's class is you will have the ability to summarize what managing up is and have an understanding of your ideal supervisory relationship. We'll examine differing characteristics between your and your supervisor's work styles. And finally, given these differences between your and your supervisor's work styles, you'll formulate a plan for a more effective working relationship. So my role as the facilitator is to share knowledge and best practices and answer your questions. Your role as the participant is to ask questions, share any knowledge that you have, and complete the exercises as we go through them. Make sure that you have accessed the handout that we sent out via email before the start of class to those who registered in TMS. If not, we'll be placing that in the chat box when the time comes for use of that handout. And ultimately, if you don't have access to the handout, when the time comes, the questions are posed on the screen and you can jot down notes on your own sheet of paper. All right, so let's get started. Our first segment will cover one method for effective employee-manager relationships, which is managing up. We'll discuss what is meant by managing up to include what it's not. And we'll take time to reflect on what you need as an employee in an ideal supervisory relationship. Before we can talk about practical application of managing up, we need to first talk about, well, what do we mean by managing up? As you can see on the screen, managing up is defined as the art of consciously improving collaboration with one's boss. So let me stop there for a moment to call out a few key words in this first part of the definition. First of all, this is an art, meaning there's no one right prescriptive way to achieve this. Because each of us are so unique in our traits and preferences, this art and its application will shift in each supervisory relationship that you encounter. Next, consciously. Often we get so wrapped up in our next deadline, a new project, or our own calendars that we don't set aside time to reflect on this important relationship and ways we can improve it. Like any relationship, it takes consistent and deliberate effort to connect with your supervisor in a manner that is mutually beneficial. Now let's proceed to the second part of the definition, the outcome of managing up, to gain the best personal and organizational outcomes. This leads into what managing up is not. This is an important distinction as this concept is sometimes negatively perceived. But when I am managing up, I'm being proactive by understanding my boss's work style, communication preferences, and goals. By creating this fruitful relationship, my own work satisfaction improves, and I'm also contributing to the overall success of the work group. Managing up is not being a yes person or inflating your boss's ego to get on their good side. And we don't want to manipulate others or provide false praise for the sake of making ourselves look good or be liked. So let's take a look at an example through a video clip. In this clip from My Big Fat Greek Wedding, a great movie, one of the characters, Tula, wants to go to work at the family travel agency, but her father is resistant to the idea. Her mother and aunt craft a plan, which is what you see play out in this clip. So as you watch this, ask yourself, is this an example or non-example of managing up? Let's take a look.
We must let Costa think this was his idea.
All right, I know.
That he came up with.
All right,
Now
now he's gonna figure
Don't
it out.
you worry.
All right, okay, I know what to do.
You don't know what to do. You talk. All
Do
the
you
time.
want my
Yes,
help?
I want your
Tell me
help.
what to say, but don't tell me what to say.
Perfect.
That's
So, Vula, how is business?
oh, woe to me. Business is bad.
What's the matter? What's happened? You need money?
No. What she means is that with the two businesses, she suffers.
She suffers?
She suffers. She has to be at the travel agency alone all day because everybody else needs to be working at the big dry cleaning store.
That's right. I make Taki go to the dry cleaner store, and now I have no time with him.
So, send Angelo or Nikki to the travel agency. You'll be with Taki at the dry cleaner.
That would be good.
That would be no good.
No good.
No good. Because neither Angelo or Nikki know how to use the computer.
And that's why that no work.
No work.
Computer. I have your answer. Tula will go to the travel agency and you send Nikki here to work for us.
I can't believe that. Wonderful.
Wonderful.
See, a man.
You're so smart.
Gus. Oh, Gus.
All right, so that brings us to our first poll for today. What do you think about that? Is this an example of managing up or manipulation? Take a moment to make your selection. And once you have, click the submit button on the poll window. And after you click submit, you can click the X to make the pop-up disappear and you can see the results in the chat. All right, I see most of us in agreement. This is not what we're talking about here when we're talking about managing up. In this video, although comical, this is more of sort of a behind the scenes manipulation to get the outcome that you want. Now, this is not what we're talking about doing in the workplace. So we'll definitely walk through some more workplace applications of this concept so you can really understand what does managing up in the workplace look like, because we know it's not manipulation or pulling the strings behind the curtain, anything like that. So great job on that poll. Tammy, so far, any questions in the chat that we need to talk through or any good commentary that we've seen?
Nothing yet other than some positive feedback about this particular clip. I did want to mention to those of you who requested captioning for this one, our apologies for not including the specific captions for this video, but we have recorded that as feedback and we will ensure that we do that for future sessions. Thank you for bringing that to our attention.
Thank you, Tammy, and thank you everyone for your understanding there. Okay, let's move on to the next slide and talk a little bit about why you should learn these skills. What are some of the benefits of learning the skills of managing up? Well, first of all, if you learn these skills, you will be empowered to act on areas within your own control. You cannot change the behavior of your supervisor, but you can change and adjust the way that you respond to them. So on the screen here, we have a concept of the circle of concern versus the circle of influence. This is from Stephen Covey's The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. There are things that we're concerned about, but we cannot influence or change. And these are items that are strictly in the circle of concern, the larger circle that you're seeing here on the screen. Author Stephen Covey suggests that we focus our efforts on items that are in both the circle of concern and the circle of influence. In the context of managing up, your behaviors and actions are in both the circle of concern and the circle of influence. Your boss's behaviors are in the circle of concern, but again, you cannot control another individual. However, as you exhibit proactive behavior by focusing on items that you're able to control, your circle of influence will grow. And then when you have that larger circle on the inside growing and expanding, then you have a greater influence over the things that you ultimately are concerned about. So some additional benefits in learning these skills is that you'll be able to begin to identify various work styles and ways to adapt to them. As we talked about in the definition of managing up, this is a conscious effort. Once you identify the differences in your supervisor's style and your style, you can choose where you want to adapt. You don't have to wait for things to happen to you. Rather, you can take action. And lastly, these skills will prepare you to be a stronger leader and manager. The skills that are required to manage up are similar to those that are best suited for managing down. So if you have aspirations of entering a formal leadership role later on in your career, you'll already have a strong set of skills for getting to know your employees. Additionally, these skills don't just apply to your formal direct supervisor, they're also applicable in peer-to-peer relationships or as you work with leaders outside of your chain of command. Let me give an example. When I worked as a district management analyst, I used this process in learning the style and communication preferences of a regional office executive director I was assigned to partner with. I came across my notes from this conversation recently, and in looking at the steps I had taken during an introductory call that I set up, I had a list of questions such as, what's the best way to get in touch with you and your staff? And learning those preferences and styles and having that deliberate discussion up front really set us both up for productive communication from the start. So next up, we have our first exercise that I would like you all to engage in. And I just placed the handout in the chat. Again, if you didn't get that via email before the class, I just placed it in the chat. Feel free to access that there. But once again, you can still just do this reflection on a sheet of paper that you have handy. The question is posed here on the screen. But what I would like you to do here is really visualize what it is that you would like to have in a relationship with your supervisor. And this is on page 1 of your handout if you're using that document. And what type of relationship with this individual will help you be the most successful, thriving employee? Describe some of the characteristics of this ideal relationship by reflecting personally. I'll give you about 60 seconds. And afterwards, anyone who's willing to place their thoughts in the chat, we can have a discussion about those. And go ahead and get started. We'll be back momentarily.
Oh, we're seeing some very specific responses coming in about things that folks need from their supervisors, like specific instructions and communication, mutual respect, feedback, being able to listen and adapt as needed, being approachable, trusting, respectful, transparency, clear goals. A lot of these soft/power skills that we talk about in many of our other emotional intelligence-based classes: open communication, support, understanding expectations, dignity, respect, confidence that I can do my job, lead by example. An acronym: HOT, honest, open, and transparent. Able to feel comfortable in expressing my thoughts with them, understanding what they need from me, empathy, good communication so that everything that is expected is crystal clear, listen to hear what's being said versus just having a response, authentic, real encouragement, constructive feedback, being available, wanting to see me do well, personal accountability, knowing that they were once in my shoes, understand my work, including how I process information, my emotional cues, how I react to stress. These are really important. All of the self-awareness, social awareness, and relationship management things that we talk about. Sense of humor, that can definitely come in handy when things get stressful too. Partnering with me, providing guidance and training, all great things. All right.
Wow. Yeah,
There we go.
such a great list of traits. And even in this brief reflection that you just completed, it's really important to continue to reflect on your own needs and have that awareness. The reason for this exercise is to gain that understanding of your own needs and desires for this relationship as you work to improve it, strengthen it, and then you can start shaping your actions based upon what you're able to control to work towards this ideal relationship using the model that we'll talk about today. So thank you, Tammy, for capturing those great thoughts shared in the chat. And thank you to all of our participants for being so vulnerable in the chat with sharing those thoughts. All right, so now that we understand what managing up is, and you have an image of your ideal supervisory relationship, let's move on to part 2. In this segment, we will look at differing characteristics between your and your supervisor's work style. We'll do this by reviewing broad categories of behaviors and preferences and give you an opportunity to consider where you fall and where your supervisor falls within these categories. So next up, we have another video. This one is from Harvard Business Publishing with Lauren Mackler. And in it, we get an overview of some of the traits that may make your work style different from your supervisor's work style. So let's have a look.
There's a lot of resources on the market about how to manage people, but there's not a lot of resources about managing up. And what that means is how to manage your boss. Effective boss management 101. A lot of people don't know how to do that. And then they end up not saying things, they hold things in, they feel stressed, they feel overwhelmed, and then they create alienation with the boss and resentment that ultimately can diminish their motivation and performance. So this is a really important skill. So the first thing to know, inside scoop, very important, get to know your boss's personality. Get to know how they operate. Get to know what they like, what their work preferences are. So for example, find out, how do you want to be communicated to? Do you like email? Do you want me to call you? Do they like the face-to-face meetings? Or, do you want even a lot of information? Or do you want me to just kind of go off and only know if there's a problem? Because some managers are micromanagers. They want to know every little detail. And some want you to be able to work autonomously. You need to know what your boss's work preferences are. Find out your boss's personality. Do they tend to be more introverted and quiet, where you have to go and solicit their time? You have to go and just kind of drop by and keep them updated on what's happening? Or are they extroverts that are always coming by and want to be engaged with you? You need to find that out. Are they more high level, kind of visionary kind of people that don't want a lot of details? Or are they more the detailed, tell me step by step, how are you going to get there? Those kinds of tips are really, really important because that's going to help you develop a better relationship with your boss. The other thing I'm going to tell you is toot your own horn. The workplace is not a place to be modest. Now, I'm not talking about being arrogant and, I'm just such a great manager. No, what you're going to do is you're going to very subtly get your accomplishments out there. So the way you can do that, let's say your team has a big hit, home run. You're going to send out an email blast congratulating your team on what a wonderful job they did. And that's a way of getting in front of other people that they can see that you're doing a good job managing your team. Also keep what I call an accomplishments file. This is very important. Track all of your completions, all of your activities, all of your projects, and when I say you and your teams, so that you can always know exactly what you've accomplished. And at performance review time, you take those completions, those accomplishments, and you're going to put them right into your performance review. I even suggest sending that once a month to your boss and saying, just thought I'd keep you in the loop. Here's all the completions and activities over the last month. Those are really your accomplishments, but you're not going to call them that to your boss. You're just going to say completions. Toot your own horn, because otherwise you may not get that promotion, you may not get that bonus, or those other new opportunities to stretch your own leadership skills and expand your skills. You want to be able to create those opportunities, and managing up is a critical way to doing that.
Thank you. So we had reached the end of that video from Ms. Mackler, and she just gave us an overview of some of the things that you might consider when looking to get to know your supervisor. That's kind of the essence of what we're getting at today, to understand their approach and learn to meet their needs while also getting your own needs met. So let's take a look about some of these differences that that you can categorize for yourself and your supervisor. First of all, we have introversion versus extroversion. These categories differentiate how an individual processes information and from where they derive their energy. An introvert will frequently work alone as they derive energy from introspection. They're likely slower to respond to questions since they do a lot of internal processing as part of their decision making. You will also notice that an introvert listens more than they tend to speak. The opposite of an introvert is an extrovert. People in this category are energized by working with others. They're quick to move to action and prefer to process their thoughts and decisions aloud. Extroverts can be very talkative. So take a quick moment to jot down, where are you on the spectrum? Are you an introvert or an extrovert? And also, how would you categorize your boss? Go ahead and jot these thoughts down on your handout.
Introvert and extrovert. I understand that completely. And if you've taken the DISC assessment with us and had our DISC class, we've probably talked about these things. It's we look at where it is that you really recharge your energy. Everyone can function in either realm. Sometimes you learn to function as an extrovert, even though at the end of the day, you may go home and just want to be completely silent and solitary and recharge yourself in that introvert way. It's where you draw your energy from, but I think it's definitely possible to function in both realms.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think too, there could be different scenarios where different parts of you come out. So some people are concerned that maybe they fall into both categories, and I think that's fine. I think the biggest part is having that awareness, knowing what your needs are and understanding how do you find your energy following a certain type of encounter or a certain type of presentation or work day format. For example, if you have a day full of meetings and you're totally drained afterwards, or maybe you're totally invigorated after a day of meetings. So just knowing those things about yourself is what is most important versus the label. So the labels are just kind of general categories for how people might typically fall. But if you find that you maybe fall in each category, that's fine too. It's just having that awareness about yourself so that you can react accordingly as different feelings arise. Okay, so while introversion and extroversion traits could have implications on these next two categories that we're talking about, it's worth exploring these categories individually. First, how do you relate to the work? And how does your boss relate to the work? Are they task-oriented such that they get right down to business in most situations with no kind of warm, fuzzy conversation? Or are they more people-oriented, where they start meetings with small talk or non-related chit-chat about how was your weekend or did you catch the game, things like that? The next category to consider is, what is their pace of work? Are they fast-paced, where they work and talk very quickly? Or do they have a more slow pace where they're methodical with decision-making and really mull over all the details at hand? Do they emphasize quality over speed? So these are all things to consider about how you might approach these items and then how your supervisor approaches these items. Remember, we're making observations now of these potential differences or similarities between you and your supervisor before we move on to looking at ways that you might choose to adapt to these differences. So I'll pause for a moment for you to think about these two categories.
We had some really good comments about, well, first, there's no slow pace since the PACT Act. I think we're all feeling that with you, Karen. And lots of folks who are able to function in both introverted and extroverted styles based on their situation. Situational introvert is a phrase everyone's relating to in the chat. Some folks haven't figured out their supervisors yet, but they're getting there. So I think we're really looking at a lot of ways we may be really strong in our self-awareness, but maybe this might be some time to work on that social awareness piece so that then we can use that self-management to build our relationships as we go along. And neurodivergence, that's another thing we want to consider as well.
Sure, yeah, lots of differences and kind of helpful frame of references for understanding ourselves and for those that we work with. So I'm hearing a lot of great self-awareness in the chat, like you're saying, Tammy. So thank you, everybody, for putting those points there. And let's go on to another area that we might consider, which is communication preferences. So, for example, when it comes to tracking progress and providing updates on a project, does your boss like high-level updates? For example, we're 75% towards completion. Or would they prefer to track all of the steps that you've accomplished to get to that 75%? So are they high level or are they micro? And for you personally, you might prefer to be very detailed about your workload. And if that's the case, then you might prepare a micro level update for yourself, but then when you go and brief your supervisor, you take out all those minute details and just give them that high level information. So that's one way to accommodate if there is a difference in that area. Next would be the cadence of work. How often do they prefer to receive updates on your workload? Is it going to vary depending upon which project they're referring to? Is it daily with your boss to assess? And secondly, again, knowing these things about yourself and what keeps you on track and what do you prefer? Just making sure that not only are you meeting what your boss is asking, but if you, again, have that difference and you like to be very meticulous in your tracking, go ahead and do that for yourself. And then also prepare that macro type of update for your supervisor. Next, you want to talk about method of communication. IMs and emails are at times more convenient for a lot of us. A phone call or a video call can be much more efficient for the type of topic under discussion. So assess the variety of work that you have in your portfolio and have a discussion with your supervisor about, based upon which project you're talking about, what's the best way to communicate about updates or questions. And if you're not sure what they prefer, again, ask and have that conversation so that you can get on the same page. Next, think about your own preferences for these same categories. If you might feel resistance in a particular communication pattern, it's likely not your preferred method of communication, but consider if your resistance is worth overcoming in the name of improving a working relationship. So a little moment of levity here. In our virtual world, I know that we're so accustomed to instant messages that we kind of forget about the phone sometimes. So sometimes with Teams and somebody maybe gives us a phone call unannounced and we just get that pop-up, it catches so many of us off guard, myself included. So I'm not sure why that is, but that is actually how the regular phone works. People don't have to give you a heads up that they're calling, but with Teams, it just sometimes feels a little different. So I just threw this little meme in here for a little bit of a laugh. I'm wondering if some of you can relate to that. Meeting face-to-face. Oh, I just saw that comment in the chat, and absolutely, face-to-face meetings can sometimes trump all of the other methods of communication, of course, depending upon the topic. But sometimes you just need that face-to-face meeting to read the body language, to have that difficult conversation. So face-to-face is always sometimes not always a feasible option, depending upon everybody's work setup, but it is another option that could really be the preferred method for some. All right, so Tammy had just mentioned DISC a little bit ago. And so if you're a regular SEEDS attendee or you've taken part in any team building activities here at the VA, you're likely familiar with the DISC framework. DISC is a tool for describing behavior types and communication styles. And an individual's DISC category is based on observable patterns of behavior. So no, unfortunately, this isn't another DISC course, but the reason I mention this topic now is because if you have awareness of your own DISC style, as well as your supervisor's DISC style, this can provide you with an additional level of insight and understanding on how your preferences and style match up against your supervisor. So if you haven't done a full assessment or explored DISC, you can go to our SEEDS SharePoint and catch our recording from that class, which took place on January 23rd. For me, I know that I'm an S style. So this means that I tend to be very accommodating to others, a peacekeeper of sorts, if you will. And I've had supervisors in the past or project leads that were the D style. And in a particular situation that comes to mind here is an instance where my project lead initially provided me with a set of expectations. I assessed the request and agreed that I could meet what was asked. And then a week or so later, the expectations shifted. Initially, I tried to accommodate the change given my S style. However, as time passed, I saw that the new requirement would not be possible to achieve within the requested time frame. I had to push back against this new requirement, and I did have the data to support my conclusion. So I felt confident in that regard, but to stand up to a D style was very, very much out of my comfort zone at the time. And in the end, it was worth my discomfort. My project lead saw my concern and we adjusted the timeline accordingly. Handling this situation with respect and professionalism helped both of us come to an achievable agreement that met the organization's need and still empowered each of us in our respective positions. All of this to say that it's helpful to be aware of these traits within yourself so that you can anticipate whether something will be slightly outside of your comfort zone in order to achieve a better outcome for yourself and your team. All right, so now we are going to move on to another category that you might consider to give you a frame of reference for identifying these differences. And this is generational differences specific to work values. Of course, we don't want to overgeneralize or stereotype, but you might find additional clues in looking at your and your supervisor's generational groupings. A study from the Journal of Organizational Behavior shows that work values are influenced more by generation than maturity or age. As such, we could find benefit in understanding underlying value structures from each generation and differences among these groups. What we mean by work values includes how someone regards work in relation to other elements of their lives, what motivates them in a work environment. So let's take a look at some major differences in generational groups, keeping in mind that everyone's unique and may not directly be in alignment with these generational conclusions. Also, I'm not advocating that you ask your supervisor how old they are, but I think in general, we can put them in one of these broad categories. So first up, the baby boomer generation. These are individuals born between approximately 1946 and 1964. And for this group, work is a large part of their individual identity. There's a great amount of loyalty to their employer with this generation, and they've often been known for a live to work mentality. Next is Gen X, which begins in the 1960s through about the early 1980s. And this generation seeks to fulfill their personal goals while also working towards workplace goals, often asking, what's in it for me? Not simply living to work. Rather, they're seeking personal fulfillment from their work. And relative to the baby boomer generation, Gen X has less loyalty to a specific employer. Next up, the millennial generation. This is from the early 1980s through about 1996 and is currently the largest generation in the workforce. Millennials have a high regard for work-life balance and enjoy a more collaborative environment as it's viewed as more fun. Lastly, the youngest generation in the workforce today is Generation Z. Born in the mid-90s through 2012, this generation has not known a world without internet or smartphones. And being that they've always been connected, they value constant feedback in the workplace, similar to the feedback offered through online interactions. So with Gen Z, they've been described as somewhat competitive with the workplace, within the workplace. All right, so let's go ahead and take another quick poll about, again, using your best estimate. What do you, are you in the same or different generational group as your direct supervisor? Let me get that poll pulled up. So once again, make your selection in the poll box, click submit, and then you can click X to have the dialog box disappear.
Couple comments coming in the chat. So we've got a Gen Xer who's been with VA for 24 years. So it looks like loyalty is definitely a plus there. And a baby boomer who is finding themselves with millennial supervisors, which is forcing some adaptation in work styles. So we have those considerations to make as well. Another interesting point from previously when we were talking about phone versus email versus in-person discussion, someone mentioned that they really enjoyed that their supervisor asked if they're ready for a call rather than making those surprise calls. And I just wanted to remind everyone about the power of asking questions. Just being able to ask questions can really help a whole lot in developing relationships when you feel safe enough to do so.
Great reminder. Yes. Thank you, Tammy, for that. And thank you to everyone who shared their own experiences of different generations in the workplace. It looks like we're about split. About half of us are in the same generation as our direct supervisor and half are in different generations. So again, simply a frame of reference for you to understand some traits. If you're in the same generational group, you might still have different work styles and work preferences than your supervisor, but this is still a helpful tool to understand how someone might regard their approach to work. And hopefully that frame of reference is something that you can work towards benefiting from as you continue this relationship. All right, now on to part 3. So you've begun the proactive step of analyzing your supervisor's traits and your own traits. Again, your analysis thus far has been somewhat brief, and I do encourage you to continue this assessment of yourself and your supervisor as time goes on. But for now, we're going to move on to part 3, in which we will discuss areas that are within your control to build a more effective working relationship. We will provide you with ideas for improving communication and reporting. And as with section 2, this won't be comprehensive, but they will be things within your control, and it will be enough to get the wheels turning as you start down this path. So one of the categories that we had reviewed was introvert versus extrovert. So you took a moment to consider where you might fall and where your supervisor falls. So let's talk about strategies for when you and your supervisor fall into opposite categories. So if you're an extrovert and your supervisor is an introvert, there's some things that you should be aware of about introverts. And introverts often have needs for internal processing by allowing them time to process and prepare when you're making a request, scheduling a meeting, or asking for guidance. So whenever possible, try to limit impromptu pop-in discussions, as an introvert may feel unprepared and will likely request time to get back to you anyways. During a discussion, be okay with silence. Don't feel obligated to fill the silence with more talking. Instead, allow an introvert to formulate their thoughts internally and then respond. The silence may feel uncomfortable initially if you're an extrovert. Lastly, since introverts derive their energy from internal sources, be sure to respect their space and allow them time to recharge. Moving on now to an introvert communicating with an extrovert. Try to exhibit friendliness with this individual, such as signals to an extrovert that you're interested in building a relationship. This could feel out of an introvert's comfort zone. Since extroverts tend to process their thoughts and decisions externally, be sure to clarify and recap next steps at the conclusion of a discussion, since some of the dialogue may have just been ideas as an extrovert works through their thoughts. Again, extroverts value social interactions. Although your introvert tendencies may make you inclined to stand by, try to speak up and get FaceTime with your extrovert boss so you don't go unnoticed. Personally, I'm an introvert, and I've been supervised by many extroverts over the years. And when I reflect back upon my past supervisory relationships, I do see instances where I fell into this comfortable habit in my role. And I didn't speak up to ask for more challenging work. In one instance that comes to mind is when I was serving as a training consultant with Compensation Service. And I had been in the role for about a year and a half. I was comfortable with all of my responsibilities. And in fact, I was so comfortable, I was getting a little bit bored. And I kept plugging away at my workload, hoping for a new assignment or project, but nothing really came my way. So finally, I worked up the courage to ask for something new. And lo and behold, my supervisor had plenty of ideas to grow my skill set and allow me to contribute in new ways. And it simply took a little bit of encouragement from within to ask for what I needed. Lastly, an introvert working with an extrovert should find time to recharge when they have a chance, given that many go out of their comfort zone more frequently when working with extroverted bosses. So let's take a look now when you might fall into the same category, when you're both introverts. While you might initially think this is a match made in heaven, there are actually a few potential pitfalls to be aware of. First, an introvert working with another introvert, there's a lot of qualities of this relationship that may feel comfortable, such as calm and quiet. Yet too much calm and quiet between the two parties might lead to less meaningful discussion and alignment of work activities. As such, be proactive to ensure your work activities are in alignment with team and organizational goals. I'll share a missed opportunity in my own experience to be proactive. When I first became an assistant coach, I was in an out-based location, and my direct supervisor was located at a regional office across the state. I now recognize, looking back, that we were both introverted. Much of the guidance that I received came through email. There wasn't a lot of regular phone calls or meetings unless something was going wrong. But being a brand new supervisor at the time, it was really not an ideal environment for my own growth. And I didn't have enough experience in the position to know that I should ask for more guidance or time on my supervisor's calendar to discuss goals. Had I known, I might have felt more supported in my new role. So when you check in with your introverted boss and you're also an introvert, ask for feedback. An introvert may be less forthcoming with constructive feedback, in which case make it known that this is what you're seeking. And doing so will open the door to such a conversation. These conscious efforts will help create connection and help build your relationship. As an introvert who has served in supervisory roles in the past, I can share that my default state is not to be chatty. Yet, if a peer or subordinate would engage me in conversation and show interest in building connection, I'm much more likely to be open and talkative during our next interaction. So moving on now to an extrovert communicating with another extrovert. So this connection is likely quite energizing for both parties, given the nature of how extroverts draw their energy. So we can celebrate that energy while still being mindful of potential downfalls of this connection. First, you'll need to control the tangents within conversations. Due to the external processing that extroverts do, two extroverts together in a conversation may take the topic in an unintended direction, which ultimately detracts from the point at hand. Next, listen to the ideas discussed during their external processing. Similar to an introvert with an extrovert, clarify and recap the decision or direction at the conclusion of a conversation. So let's take a moment now to commit to one shift you can make based upon your introverts or extrovert dynamic within your supervisory relationship. Go ahead and start kind of mulling that over. What is, based upon your own dynamic within your supervisory relationship, what is something that comes to mind that you might benefit from?
Looks like asking for feedback. Two extroverts who need to stay on topic. Controlling the tangents, learning to listen, being mindful, first and foremost, clarifying goals, recapping conversations. All good stuff. Sharing the conversation, offering solutions if you're an introvert. Absolutely taking that opportunity to step up and be heard. Making a conscious effort to connect, even extra important in our virtual world when we're not face to face, and using technology to your advantage to do that sometimes. Recap and clarify to avoid having unanswered questions. Restating expectations and timelines. Clarity is so important. Being proactive in your own advancement. Great comments.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody, for that reflection. And I'm glad that your wheels are turning. You're getting some practical steps that you can take to continue to grow this relationship. And as we continue to reflect on ways that we can build that stronger connection, let's take a minute to think about our own listening skills as one potential growth area. Thank you. So interestingly, we spend more than half of our day listening, yet we retain very little of what we hear. A study out of the Managing Upward book by Patty Hathaway found that we hear about half of what is said. We listen to half of what we hear. We understand half of that and believe half of that and remember only half of that. So when translated into a 8-hour workday, that only comes down to about 15 minutes of really solid listening and understanding. So granted, that's one perspective, not the case in all situations, but it does give a little bit of gives us a little bit of pause to consider, how well do we listen? Are we distracted when we're in a meeting and not fully engaged, and maybe we're coming up with our own next response in our head versus taking in that information? So something to consider. And now we'll talk about a couple of ways that you can actually help curb some of these statistics. So first of all, you can capitalize on thought speed. Most people speak at a rate of about 125 words per minute, yet the brain can comprehend about 500 words per minute. Because of this, you might find that you daydream or interrupt your boss with tangential thoughts. But so be aware of this. And if you happen to catch yourself drifting off, pull yourself into that moment. Next, you want to judge the content and not the delivery. Some listeners focus on a speaker's appearance or personality, but if you instead shift your concentration to focus on the message being communicated, that can really help you with information absorption. Also consider resisting distractions. Sometimes distractions can be easily handled by closing a door, turning off the radio. But if you take notes during a conversation, this will send a message that you're engaged in the conversation. Try to hear what is said. Sometimes we don't understand what is said, even if we hear it directly, because we hear what we want to hear. We often employ selective listening without really realizing it. So knowing that this can happen, we should make it a point to listen to what is being said and not filter out critical information. And lastly, really try to work at listening. To be a good listener, make a conscious choice to be active in your listening. You're likely familiar with active listening, which includes making eye contact with the speaker, nodding for comprehension, asking questions, recapping what you've heard and so that you can demonstrate that you understand back to the speaker. But what about in the virtual environment? How can we demonstrate active listening in the virtual environment? Things like turning on your camera are hugely beneficial in this case, so that you can have, it's not actually face-to-face, but it's as close as we can in that virtual environment. So give that consideration. All right, so, and one final point about listening here is that the easiest way to be a good listener is if you arrange the words and listen, it actually spells silent. So if we are trying to absorb information, we have to actually, quiet our minds, and actually quiet our speaking. So I thought that was a fun little puzzle there to help us remember that. Okay, so the last tool that I want to provide you with today is the 5x15 report. And this is a communication tool that you might consider using. In my team, we actually use it on a weekly basis. It's called a 5x15 report because it should take no more than 5 minutes for your supervisor to read it, and no more than 15 minutes to prepare it. And the intent of this tool is it is a vehicle for communication to provide updates about what you've accomplished, about what you're working on, about things that you might need their input on. And you'll see that we have a template for this in your handout, which again, we'll send out via email after this if you don't have it yet. But this might be something that you could consider as a tool to open up those lines of communication. As a matter of fact, the reason that we employ it on my team is a result of our all-employee survey, where we asked for more communication with our supervisory team. And as a result, we came together and developed this solution. So that's really a classic example of managing up. Getting together with your peers and making a suggestion or offering a tool that will help develop and build that relationship. Okay, so our final slide today, and the things that I want to impart onto you is these plans and these steps will empower you. You don't have to stay within the pack waiting for things to happen to you. You should feel empowered to take action on the things that you can control. Learning to apply these relational skills will activate leadership qualities within yourself. And as your new abilities grow in this area, you'll find this process to connect with others can apply to your peers and eventually your own subordinates should you enter a formal leadership role in the future. And now that you've identified some differences between your behaviors and your boss's behaviors, take a moment in the near future to really develop your own action plan. What are the things that you're going to do with your supervisor? Are you going to schedule a call? Are you going to set aside that time to have that conversation? I invite you to do that further reflection within the handout and really take those next steps to building that relationship. So Tammy, any questions or dialogue from the chat that we'd like to bring to the forefront?
There are some great points being made. Someone mentioned that hearing is a body function, but listening is a brain function. Very good way to look at that. Someone else said that their uncle explained that if you can't get your point across in 25 words or less, you should start over until you can, to be really succinct and clear. And then, of course, we had to throw in a little bit of humor when you did the listen and silent transition. The letters also spell out tinsel, those shiny things that can distract us, especially in the virtual setting where it can be, detract us from our listening. So we wanted to again point out that we have to be extra intentional about listening in the virtual environment. Yeah, there's some really fun comments in here. Everyone's been getting a lot out of this, it looks like. And of course, we also wondered if we could use some of those statistics about how much we actually hear and remember as excuses for missing deadlines and slacking on our dissertations, but I know no one's really going to do that.
Oh my goodness. Wow. I always learn so much from the audience in these sessions. So I appreciate everybody sharing those insights. Such great tools that you shared. And I want to just do a quick recap of the objectives that we looked at today. And we talked about managing up and we identified your ideal supervisory relationship. So again, continue to reflect on that, ask those questions. We looked at different characteristics between you and your supervisor's work styles. And then we talked about formulating a plan to continue to make that relationship more effective. So I really appreciate everybody being here today, the insights that you've shared. I hope the content was valuable for you today. Would love to connect with you in the future if you have additional questions or if there's anything I can do to support you as you continue this relational exploration. Would be glad to answer any questions. But with that, I'll hand it back over to Jesse to close out the session. Thank you so much, everybody.
All right. Thank you so very much, Ms. Pravat. We greatly appreciate you taking the time today to go over effective employee manager relationships. All right. At this time, I'm going to drop the survey link into the chat. I just dropped it in there now. I'm going to try to pin it So we'll see if I can get that to work. Again, thank you so much for all of your patience this morning and this afternoon as we worked through some technical difficulties that we were having with Teams. And again, we greatly appreciate you attending today's session. If you do have any questions, feel free to utilize the chat and let us know. Again, fill out that survey so we can continue to update these series. And finally, our SharePoint site will have both the recording and all of the materials and content from today's session by close of business tomorrow, April 3rd. And with that, I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. And again, thank you for attending today's Skills Enhancement and Employee Development session.